Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to this 59th episode of Clarity Chat and our 10th Ask Me Anything version of it. As always, I begin the session by thanking all of you, our audience, for the encouragement and support and engagement uh, while, uh, while we continue to push the agenda on the business value of technology. So this week is an unbroken stint of 5 direct discussions with you. Um, um, for some or the other reason, we have been having the guests missing out, either a compliance reason or some exigency on their part. So, but that gives me an opportunity to have these live sessions with you, the question answers. Always welcome that. So I'll be answering your live questions as well as picking up some unanswered questions from our backlog from the past chats. Yeah, we can also grace this chat with your visit to the studio, a live visit, an option I give in all my AMAs. So you can ping us in the comment box if you want to join and discuss something. My team will send you, the link of the studio, um, and we can connect in a live conversation. Okay. But as always, let's talk real experiences and practical stuff, and let Gyan sleep over the weekend. Okay. So we had one unanswered question in the past, which um, gave me a sort of um, option that, do I really want to read up on it, or do I want to bring in someone to answer that question for all of you. And so we will be joining a thought leader from Google to answer that question, and he really makes simple of complex concepts, and that is what we will discuss in a while from now. We'll cover some backlog of past questions, like, for example, ownership and accountability in the role of an IT consultant, hiring skills and not the people in the new normal, AI/ML, data science, and metaverse. And that's the last question, where I'm going to bring in uh, our secret leader. Okay, no longer to be secret after a while, uh, and of course, answering your questions. But before going ahead, let me request our audiences to share their name and where you are joining from in the comment box of LinkedIn or YouTube. Um, so let let us discuss some of these topics in this informal setting. No live questions as of now. So let me pick up. Please keep sending them. Please start sending them, not keep sending them. But let me take some questions from our past backlog of past clarity chats. So we have one question from Partha Bhattacharyya. How can one have ownership and accountability in the role of an IT consultant? This is two ways. One is, the consultant wanting to have empowerment, ownership, and accountability. Second is, are you willing to give it to them? Do you trust them, or are you willing to let go of whatever you have, and then create the opening for their expertise? So as always, I'll talk through experiences. We had long back in my first technology project, we kind of figured out that everything is not all right with the program management the way our partner was doing it. So we we roped in very senior consultant from our OEM partner itself, um, and he landed and we had a chat with him and we kind of figured out that he knows his stuff. We just gave him the problem statement that we are not happy with this. We don't see this, and this is where our concerns are. Even though we cannot validate them, we don't have the necessary competence to validate those concerns. But please do that. And he's like, okay, uh, so are you willing to give me a free hand? We said yes. We'll watch. And then we got into the conference room with our SI partner, and you should have seen that uh, the consultant asking all kinds of questions, many of them which were uncomfortable for even us. But then I think within a day and a half precisely, he had the complete control uh, and a finger on the pulse of what's not right. And then he basically started putting together the frameworks, etc. And then he basically downloaded all his what do you call diagnosis and what needs to be done better, and give it to us. Um, Another example. So the point is that we give him the ownership. We did not say that what everything needs to go through us, or what if, let's say, something that I'm not doing right comes out. So no holds barred. Something similar happened much later, um, which was we had some we were undertaking an upgrade with vastly new functionality, which we knew that nobody in India had any clue about, and so we got the most rare and precious consultant coming to us at in those times, almost 15 years back, coming at about $1,500 a day, blocking his time many months in advance. And we did exactly the same thing. So we to maximize his effectiveness, what we did was to start prepping him up much in advance to establish the connect. We said, okay, ask us all the questions that you want. This is what we want to do. This is the business context. This is the current problem statement that we have. This is where we feel that it will become unmanageable in the future, and this is the complete solution we are looking for. And this guy, well, I mean, so we kind of entrusted him, with the solution, and left no stone unturned in providing all the information. And when he came, he was fully prepared. We also utilized the time for him to, we said, like, we want you to train our team also. Like, we want to you to make us self sufficient in terms of passing on, all the architectural information, knowledge, constraints, etc., etc. So again, we gave him the ownership. He came in, he took charge, and and I think that system is still runs. So the point, in my view, is having ownership and accountability in the role of an IT consultant. More than that, having that trusted relationship with your customers to to get that empowerment with yourself. I mean, um, in my role as an advisor, I've had that sort of flavor um, where I work with my customers to seek that empowerment, tell them what we need to do, and then have somebody from the customer side to make sure that there's a complete, I would say, passing on of the expertise and knowledge, even as we are working on it. So just to summarize it, couple of things, it's more important for the customer to give you that empowerment, and it's your job to create that trust and that comfort that you get that empowerment. Number two, it's equal parts again on both sides. That means don't try to be the bottleneck, or don't try to be that I know it all. I think you should be passing on all the information and knowledge, so that on the other side you get that ownership on the other side for your work, and for you to be more effective. I hope that answers your question, Partha. I see you are here in the chat. I am. Let me bring you in. Which is yeah, it's the same Partha. Hey, thanks, Partha, for joining us. We have another LinkedIn user, but I don't know who that is. If you can announce your name, that will be great. And yeah, thanks, Vinay, for reaching out to people to ask their questions. Okay, so let me go to our next question, and we have our surprise guest here, Madhu from Google. Hey, hi, Madhu. Good evening. You're on mute, Madhu.
Hey, good evening. Hello, everyone.
Hey,
Nice to
hi,
connect.
Madhu.
I've been an audience a couple of times, but this is interesting the other way around.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know, like as I said in the beginning, I don't know whether you heard or not. I said, when somebody asked me this esoteric question about AI, ML, data science, metaverse, I was like, do I want to answer it? This when some of these things happened after I came out, so I haven't had the chance to double my hands with them. And I said, and then I remembered you. I said, listen, let me ask it to a practitioner and somebody who keeps deep diving into the. But Madhu, before we go ahead, a quick introduction from you.
Uh, I mean, 25 years in technology, originally built a Siebel product, and then was consultant there for about a decade in the Valley and then in India. Joined Jagdish in Tata Motors. I think this was 2010. Did a bunch of interesting stuff with him, which was to do some of the transformation that he did, the whole CRM DMS landscape for a good journey, and then the telematics journey that he went with. Later on, did a startup, EasyTap, fintech startup based in Bangalore. Took it to Series C. We ran out of, we're sort of chugging along right now. Then joined AWS. I was the chief evangelist for AWS in India. Then I also was head of solution architecture for the startup business. And I'm currently the field CTO for Google Cloud in India for the last 2 years.
Yeah, no, your technology credentials are absolutely,
I love technology. I cannot talk as philosophically and nicely as Jagdish does with people, and the amount of learning I've had from him on the emotional quotient side of things. Right, I come a little more. How do you put it? Bits and bytes.
No, but Madhu, that's what really worked for us, So
Right.
I bringing in the business and the people part of it, Madhu bringing in the technology aspects of it, and that was a nice tango, a guitar and tabla playing together.
Yeah, I was playing
Yeah,
Western, he was playing Indian, and then we figured it out.
yeah, and we had a good fusion.
Yes, yes.
Yes, absolutely. So let's take it one by one, Madhu. So the question was like, AI, ML, data science, metaverse. So let's start, from the AI and ML. So just like one of the things that I admire about you is to like, break it down and explain it into simple layman, language
Okay.
from a technology point of view. And to everyone out there listening to us, Madhu and I used to go to leadership teams together and have our one-on-ones. And he used to bring in some nice pictures. I still remember and still quote that one where Our opening to the leaders used to be this kid, holding a book in his hand and having a quizzical expression on his face, with a caption saying that, a book is an iPad that doesn't work. That was
Yep.
about the
Broken
generational.
iPad kind of an. There was an old one. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
So
yeah, you're a question on AI. Yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So like, I mean, how do you sort of, so AI/ML, we do see a lot of people talking about it, and most of the time it's not what it is. So what is it for you?
No. So AI/ML, in essence, is fundamentally mathematics, right? At its heart. So when you think of IT as a discipline within an enterprise, you have to now, and IT was largely, I mean, if you look at much of the work that we did in IT, it was largely about um, systems, technology, and operations, right? It's about taking the process and codifying it into systems, putting them, and then, managing the operations and making that, as long as the systems were available, the codified processes would continue to run. That is how we looked at IT. Uh, Now, shift the lens to data. There is data being collected constantly. And what we do in IT is we take the data and try to present it. We don't use the data in a manner of science or in a manner of taking advantage of it to look forward into the future. And in the most simplistic way to think of it, when you do analytics, which I'm sure everybody here definitely does analytics, right? What you're really looking at when you look at an analytical dashboard is you're looking at a rear view mirror of your business, right? And if when you're a business leader, you want to drive the car forward through the front glass. The rear view mirror is important, but you still have to look through the front glass. And what you're doing in AI and ML is basically saying, hey, the road that I drove so far looked nice enough, and this is what it's telling me. These are my signals. Therefore, the road ahead should probably have similar, outcomes, right? And this is something that we do when we drive. Let's say you're doing a long distance drive. What you're doing is you've covered in about 3 hours a certain amount of distance. You forecast that you will arrive somewhere in a certain time and window. And if you know up ahead that there are going to be narrower lanes or construction lines, etc., then you will buffer for that, and you know where you will be. You forecast yourself out there. And that's the mental math that we do as human beings, and if and that's the data that we use to do that, right, based on past experiences, our other pieces of additional knowledge, and we forecasted that we will get somewhere. The mathematical approach to doing that is in essence AI and ML, right? And there are many methods in that. There is statistical methods, which is it's been used for the last 30-40 years. It used to have previously the term advanced analytics for some time. And it's remember, nothing in AI ML is brand new. Almost most of the algorithms or the mechanics that we use today, if you look at the actual underlying mathematical paper, it will be 1980, 78, 84, 85, etc. So they've been around for a long time. The challenge has been for us to be able to apply that math, you need a certain quantum of data, a volume of data, let me put it that way, a certain amount of compute power, a certain velocity in which you can process that data. I mean, if your hard disk was slow or your SSD was slow and your bus on the technology system was slow, it's not going to work. So the compute had to get really mature, the networks had to get mature, the capability, the storage had to get mature. Now what happens is we have the ability to do that, and that's literally what AI/ML is. So there are fundamentally a few things. It's like, can I do forecasting? Can I look forward into what can potentially happen? What should happen next? Can I estimate something? Right? Can I classify something? The way to think about them is like this. Okay. Classification. Can I allocate things into different buckets? That's machine learning. Can I estimate something forward? That's machine learning. Can I forecast something forward? That's machine learning. And we can do more and more that way. That's basically the heart and soul. The tooling today has become extremely sophisticated. You really need a team within your organization that focuses on AI/ML. To a certain times, I go to the extent to debate that I don't think AI/ML is an IT problem. you need an AI ML discipline inside your organization. Because we happen to do it with computers, it gets chugged along with IT. No, it's actually more like an independent discipline. You need to do that. But eventually, IT and the ML team, the data team, will come together, because you have to bring them together to be of relevance to the business, right? And that's what AML is.
Absolutely. So let me kind of recap it. So what you're saying is that the underlying mathematical concepts have been there for very long, right?
Yes.
The even the technology to do it has been there, but I think what has really changed is the velocity and volume of information that can be processed today. I mean, that's available today to be processed, as well as the amount of compute capacity that can be thrown at that. And what that means is that while let's say you were running those models or those algorithms, you know let's say weekly or daily or weekly those days, today you can run them in real time, and you can do it in
Correct.
at a much
You,
different.
True. Basically, it has been commoditized. Let's put it that way. I mean, if you think of technology, there was an entire era all the way till 80s where technology was restricted to very few organizations that could really afford it, right? And then from the 80s onwards, technology took a nosedive, and then basically Murphy's Law came in and it became available. Today, all of us have phenomenal amount of technology. I mean, one of the examples I give is that most of us have more technology than President Clinton had in the entire of White House in our pockets.
Correct.
Our cell
Absolutely.
phone is faster than the fastest computer the White House had, right? That
Right.
phone is faster. It has more memory, it has more storage, and a faster storage than what President Clinton had. And if you can think about the level of commoditization that occurred, right? The same thing has happened in the space of AI and ML. It's not like NASA did not. NASA did it for the Apollo missions. They did forecasting. That's how you predict where something would be. It's continuous mathematical estimation of where a rocket would be over a certain period of time. But now what has happened is you have reached a point where it is commoditized enough that we can do phenomenal amount of math with it and capability with it. And when you apply that to perceptrons, which is deep neural networks, etc., it almost looks like magic because the computer is now seeing, hearing, listening, so on and so forth.
Oh no, absolutely, absolutely. And I think I've tried some of those I would say showcases where you say something and it draws a painting of that.
Yes, it's called generational adversarial networks. It basically is two neural networks, one that generates random content and another one that says I like this or I don't like this, and then eventually they come and narrow it down to saying, okay, this is what you meant. So they are adversarial networks that compete to eventually arrive at that outcome. And then you have reinforced learning for gaming and things like that. For scenario processing inside businesses, we can use reinforcement to learning to actually drive that. So the techniques have improved a lot. The capabilities improved a lot. Um, Today, one of the things I normally tell anybody when I meet any CIO, and whenever I meet them, and I tell them the real question you need to be asking yourself is, every single business leader should be asking this question to themselves: how am I leveraging AI and ML to make something better in my, or gain an unfair advantage in my business line? Not at the overall business, just in my business line. If you're in HR, if you're in operations, wherever you are, it is possible to apply that mechanism or the tooling around there to gain an unfair advantage in what you do.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. So then comes the next logical extension of that question: data science.
Data science is the ability for you to start making sense and meaning out of the data, right? I mean, I pick a it's a fairly old example, actually. A lot of people know this, I'm sure. Let's take Uber, right? And Uber does, and this is actually published on their engineering blogs, etc. But basically Uber does is when they started figuring out what is the probability percentage that somebody will accept their search price, right? Remember, when you run short of vehicles, whatever, a search price is presented to you, and when the search price is presented to you, you have to say yes, I will accept it, or no, you won't, right? And there is a probability on it. So Uber wanted to detect what is the probability percentage that somebody will accept it, and they took all the acceptances and declines, etc., and this analysis. And can you imagine the variable that drove the highest amount of probability? It is the battery percentage on your phone,
Wow.
right? Because if your battery is less than 10%, the probability of you accepting a search price is the highest.
Hmm.
Correct? I mean,
Absolutely.
the corollary could be very interesting. Is like, so if the battery percentage is less than 10%, should I just present a search price?
Oh my God.
So the data science is the ability for you to make sense of your data, to understand, which way something is going, and how I should uh, understand my data, gain insights into my data. That's the science behind it. Then you take that and then you build your models. And when you run inference with your models, you're getting machine learning. And then when you take actions on those machine learning insights, you get AI. So that's sort of how I separate them. Data science is the ability to make sense out of your data. ML is the ability for you to build models and do predictions against it. And based on the predictions, when you take actions, you call them AI. When there are no actions, it's only ML,
Yes, yes,
right?
absolutely.
And when you're processing data, you're doing data science.
No, that's great. I mean, no, I think you have really segregated it, and nobody will say it in the anybody
It's
in our audience won't say it in the same breath again. They would at least know that what where to use what.
it's sort of, think about it as a maturity curve, right? You first want to be able to build capability to understand data. That's data science. That you have to build that discipline inside. How we have IT operations science inside our businesses today in IT, you need a data science team that builds and understands your data. Right now, what to when I see, I mean, I remember in Tata Motors when I was there, we used to have this very interesting thing, like, job card volumes will increase over the month end, right? I'm like, customers have no month end for servicing vehicles. I understand sales, but why would service have a month end, right? It's a very strange thing that happens, right? That analyzing the data, analyzing the human pattern behind it to understand why that happens is data science, right? You have to understand that you should know the difference between correlation and causation, right? And be able to bring that together. That's data science. Then you build that into a model so that you can do decisioning faster. Remember, ML is about reducing your cost of decision making, correct? Every single decision, when people say, hey, a recommendation engine is nothing but a salesperson in your store walking around telling the customer, sir, would you like this? Right? If they're doing that on the retail store, even you looked at two shirts, the person says, sir, have you looked at that brand in that aisle? When the salesperson does that, that's the same thing happening in a digital store as a recommendation engine. And that decisioning mechanics is what that is, right? And that's ML. And then finally, AI is the ability to take action on it. When you say, these events are occurring and therefore I'm going to go and take this action. That's AI.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. No, that's thanks for demystifying that, Madhu, and that was the entire purpose of bringing you here. So let
Anytime.
me. I've got started getting some comments here. So let me just pull in these folks here. So there's Hanish Tiwari from Accenture Pune. You have Dr. Labh Singh, an elderly gentleman but very very active. Thank you, sir, for joining us. We have Dattatreya from Oman, from in. I think Dattatreya, you are from Oman, right? Okay, yeah, you have mentioned later. We have our S Punjabi. Do you remember?
Yes, yes, very much. Hi.
Hi, Sunil. And then we have Dattatreya. He's from Oman, so he mentioned this. Yeah. Okay. Hey, thanks, Partha, for validating that. This was the question I took before you came in, Madhu. Now, yes, the last part of that question, again, getting reiterated from Dattatreya. Please throw some light on Metaverse as well.
Metaverse, uh, think about them as virtual 3D experiences, right? Think about it as I mean, so we are all used to this concept of a website. Let me start with that. You used a concept called a website, right? Now, a website is to a large extent a 2D experience. You go, you browse, you look at content. It's reading. You can do some video. You can do some images, etc., etc. You can do some interactivity. Now, if I apply AR, VR, XR capabilities, which is phenomenally improving, and 3D that's improving phenomenally, and then using these capabilities, I give you a much more immersive experience. That's the first starting point of metaverse, right? And of course, there are two different things, right? Because now what happens is, remember, the compute required or the mechanics required to deliver a website is far, far lower than delivering a metaverse experience, right? When I got to do 3D geometry to deliver it, that's much more math than a lot more compute and a lot more data than the other one. So where a website could run off a beautiful single core or two core machine, this would require significantly more compute when users come in, right? So that's the starting point of a metaverse. So there is a reason why these business models on metaverse, like like Roblox and others, exist, right? So that's you need a whole stack to stand up on. Then what happens is, within that metaverse, what happens is you basically pick up real estate, as they call it. But what is real estate is essentially reserved compute power, right? Which through which you're going to render and deliver what you have. And then the minute you have there, think about it. Now shift to the mental corollary to a shopping mall. What happens there is, you want a common currency in that space to work across, right? I mean, once I come into that space, I want a common currency that I can work across with everybody. So that's where the coins come in, and a lot of the digital assets that you can transact in that space of metaverse becomes NFTs and tokens and things like that. So you can deliver a lot of experiences for customers, consumers. You can run experimentation. You can experiment on your brand, your messaging, your storylines. You can do co-innovation, collaboration, etc., etc. Typically, metaverses are expected to be always on. It's not expected to come on and off. I mean, there are people who have done events in metaverses, um, right? But typically you keep them on so that people can come and engage with you. That's pretty much what it is. We have had versions or capabilities like this in the past. Like Second Life was a fairly old one. That was, I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe. I don't know if I got
Yeah,
it. It was
yeah,
really
that,
old. It's still around somewhere, etc. But today, the 3D libraries are so powerful, both on the phone and what you can get out of your desktop and your HoloLenses and other, uh, headset-based, augmented capabilities that we have. We can actually deliver uh, significantly immersive experiences. I mean, it's breathtaking to watch some of the things that Unreal Engine can do. And if you've seen the latest Matrix movie, you sort of understand what it can do. A good part of the movie is Unreal Engine, not short at all.
no,
Right? And for those in
I
matter, the latest BMW ad that came out, that is also Unreal Engine. The entire background, the car is actually sitting in a studio, not driving, doing nothing. The background screen is moving. That's not green screen, by the way. It's an immersive LED display that's changing the scenery. That's Unreal Engine. And so you have, so that kind of immersion capabilities are possible today. And
yeah,
and if you're thinking like, hey man, this sounds a little here and there, go talk to a 15-year-old. That's where I learned metaverse. My son.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know where to go. Is my 18-year-old son who's going to
Pretty
tell me
much.
more about metaverse. But
They live in this space right now.
yeah, that's right. So I think it reminds me again, like as you were talking, I was trying to connect the dots, and I remember that we had this huge, very expensive setup in our engineering center. If you remember, with those headsets, VR
Yes.
headsets, so then you would bring up these projectors,
The
like
holographic simulators, correct. We had that.
and then you will be able to then, like, move the car around, go inside, explode a particular sort of aggregate and all of that. And
Yeah.
what we are seeing is that that required a significant, so that required significant amount of compute power, that required significant amount of, let's say, that required those expensive headsets, right? Those required you to be basically pulling in data at a very different scale from your servers and then rendering it in
Correct.
real time, moving around and all that. And what we are saying is that each of those elements have unlocked in terms of capacity and in terms of cost, right?
Correct. I mean, when we saw this, in the plant, this was 2012, 13, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah,
And this is
yeah,
now 10 years later, right? So a few things that have happened. 3D geometry and graphics cards have become something else today. I mean, it's several orders of magnitude better than where it was. Number one,
correct.
the compute capabilities in terms of multi-core and access to it has improved. Data bandwidth speeds have improved. The cloud is substantially much different today than what it was in 2012. I mean, today, some of the biggest VM machines you can buy are actually on the cloud. It's very hard to buy capacities of machines in the real world or some of the scales that the hyperscalers can offer. Um, so now, if you start thinking about it like that, and start thinking about how will I deliver it, and the kind of caching that offers, this kind of real-time engagement, right? The network velocities and throughputs that is making this possible, this call possible, was even very hard within the same office building 10 years ago. I mean, 10 Mbps was considered state of the art inside an office building not very long ago,
Yeah,
right? We are
yeah.
talking gigabit broadband today, right? So that has fundamentally pushed and changed the art of possible and what is possible. That's all of this. So it's the math, it's the libraries, it's compute, it's network, it's storage. And now that means I can compute everything somewhere and I can deliver it as an immersive experience to individuals here. Remember, the metaverse has a long way to go, right? So practically everybody is experimenting. Let's be very clear on that, right? It's
Yeah.
not, so it's experiments that you're running to see how you engage. And there is a certain kind of audience that prefers that. So it's a great space for education. It's a great space for engagement, so on and so forth today.
So just to give you, like, my own personal experience, I was part of a jury of a company who was running those internal innovation, challenges. And the first prize was earned by a group which was basically creating assets for the metaverse. Okay,
Yes,
so so they had
absolutely.
set up, a sort of studio kind of outsourced center where they had these, like, fancy cameras and all that, and the customers, which are, let's say, luxury brands, they would bring in their they would get their stuff and they would start shooting them with those 360-degree cameras. Okay,
Mhm.
and then sort of then fine tune the whole thing and then send those graphics back to the customers to be put in their metaverse stores. I was like,
Jagdish, if you remember the California gold rush, it's
uh
not the people who mined the gold that made money. It is the people who sold the tools to mine the gold that made money.
exactly, absolutely. No, it was, and these are, like, the host of eateries that came up, who were the eateries,
Yeah,
the
the
games.
eateries, the people who sold the metal equipment, all of that, the transportation facilities, etc., etc. A large part of the banking infrastructure that supported it, they all
Yeah,
made a lot more money than the people who actually mined the gold.
absolutely, absolutely.
Right. So that's going to be there as that evolution. Eventually, what happens is those things will get commoditized. That will happen. Right. Eventually,
Yeah.
things will get commoditized and it'll become thinner and thinner. But today, it is the tooling infrastructure that has to improve substantially. And there's a lot of assets. I mean, today, for example, if you look at what it takes to build up a website, it's a matter of minutes to hours. Right. You can stand up a decent website in a day, really easily. If you go back 2005, I remember this because we were trying to stand up a website, and it was a 1 month project to do something similar to that. And it did not even have the responsiveness or the capability that today's websites would have. And that was a 1 month project, and that was 2005. right? So all of that is to do with the tooling and capability that came in that brought us this maturity. And I think you're going to see that with the metaverse probably faster though,
Yeah, yeah.
right? There's a lot of work being done in the space right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something which could probably unlock it, and like, my novice view on it, and maybe seeking some validation from you, is that, I think the big sort of connection that needs to be made in, like, all these immersive experiences sort of being stitched in the metaverse and then being delivered to you is the network, right? How much of capacity that can handle. So I think today the broadbands can handle that kind of capacity, but I think when
Your
5G
4G
comes,
can handle, 5G comes, it will be a very different. You'll be able to interactively go back and forth. It's no longer
absolutely.
just streaming.
Yeah. So I think, that's like one missing component where, all these experiments are like going to go on steroids the moment, 5G becomes real, and, you have, it will be a
Right.
very different story then. Yeah.
So if you look about, see, 3G as a technology, I think was there late 80s, right? And the challenge of 3G was that it did not have a problem to solve. The solution existed. There was no problem space,
Hmm.
correct? And then it came to almost late 90s when audio streaming came up, so that you could actually listen to audio streams over 3G, and your call clarity and many things started coming up. Then when 4G came, it was enabled that basically the reason 4G took off primarily was media streaming, which is watching our OTT channels and things like that became a massive thing that powered the 4G push, right? I mean, YouTube and a lot of these properties basically drove that, and the consumption grew with that. With 5G, it's going to be, yes, there is 5G has two different what I call silos of capability. One is around everything that you can do in the enterprise IoT space, right? So 5G has a whole bunch of capabilities there, very different discussion. And then there is everything to do with metaverse and engagement and things like that that you can do because of the latency advantage that you get with 5G. Remember, the 5G it's not just the speed, but it's a substantial jump in latency improvement, right? Which today runs into hundreds of milliseconds, should come to like 10, 15 milliseconds for most hops. So that should give you tremendous support.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And like for me, the realism of metaverse and 5G comes from that anchor that I've found today in talking to you. That studio, that multi-million dollar
Yes,
studio of our engineering center, where we could really get enthralled about, like, what's inside a car, and like, how the components come together, how you can see this, in a virtual reality way, even the car being like 2 years away from the first prototypes. I think that's something, if you can bring it to consumers, I think the engagement that you can have and
true.
the
I mean,
interaction that you can have is very different.
to your dealers first, right? I mean, if you can take it to your dealers and show them, hey, does this make sense to you in the market? Because they are the people actually in front of the customer, right? The dealers are
Absolutely.
actually the people in front of the customers, right? They will give us the first line. They can give you the first line feedback. And when you product experimentations, you want your front line to be able to assess and understand whether this makes sense to the market, and then get your champion customers on board, your fans on board, and then you are able to bring that product evolution forward. I mean, most product is incremental, right? There are very few companies that have the ability to develop the whole product in secret and come and say, hey, I have this. Very few companies have that ability. Most companies have to have that whole, they have to come through the chain of engagement to build popularity for a product and market it. And I think this is a phenomenal tool to drive that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, no more market research.
I think this is a redefined view of market research.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
Yeah, this is
No
a
more
redefined. So market research
traditional
gets
market
flipped.
research.
Correct. You can, your cost of experimentation has become lower, so you can actually bring the product and say, hey, do you like this? Because it's still product is still virtual, as opposed to going and saying, would you like a vehicle that has 4.5 feet in length, right, with 14-inch tires, I mean, for 16-inch tires, I mean, with the pencil sketch, etc. That we take that to another level, right, in the automotive space. And that's true with almost everything else, even whether it's brand labeling, logos, names of companies, any number of products, different needs, what possibilities are. I think all of them can be simulated. The beauty is in the metaverse, you can bring physics to the picture,
Absolutely.
right? So you can actually apply physics and chaos to the picture to understand how something would behave, right? And allow people to interact with it safely and understand what the outcomes would be.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No, that's great. That's great. Hey,
Right? And I
thanks,
know
Madhu.
one thing, I know, really sorry, just wanted to add. I know most of you are CIOs in this group, etc. Remember, your data center or other IT infrastructure or IT operations, your service desk, etc., can also be simulated, right? You can run a virtual service desk on the metaverse to see how people react in the case of a chaotic situation, how to drive a triage, etc. You can just simulate that over there. You don't have to do it here.
Absolutely.
You can do a DR drill there to first get people acclimatized to the idea of DR.
Yeah,
Perfect.
that's right. That's right.
Thanks a lot, Jagdish.
Hey, great, Madhu. It was like very refreshing. Now I'm like thinking that, oh my God, I should have like, really promoted this whole thing a little more in terms of what our interaction is going to be. But maybe like, that gives me an idea that, one day I'm going to get you for a full dedicated session on technology,
Anytime.
and
Anytime.
demystifying some of these things. So on that note, thanks, Madhu, for joining me.
Thanks a
And it
lot.
was a very, I would say, you know, it was like just like a flash of an idea that, hey, you know what, the best person to talk about these things in a layman's language is Madhu. And thanks for accepting that. Thank you, man. Have a good
Thank you.
weekend.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
You too.
Okay, so that was a refreshing chat with Madhu. I'm sure all of you liked it. I learned quite a lot. In fact, the distinction between data science and ML and AI, the way he narrated it and the way he sort of um, gave the perspective, actually, I learned quite a lot. So, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of appreciation for that. Hanish says that thanks, Madhu, super conceptual clarity that you brought in data science ML. Yeah, you took my words, Hanish. And we have Vijay saying, thanks, Madhu, that piece was superb. Absolutely, Madhu. Sorry, absolutely, Vijay. And yeah, thanks, Anish, for those kind words. So I have one. So let's move on after that great session. I hope you still remain here and not go satiated as even yet. So Dr. Labh Singh asked that, don't you agree, Jagdish, that some companies are misguiding the innocent customer in the guise of giving better customer experience with buzzwords and crazy differentiators without much value in the product or service? Mm. So, Dr. Sir, I would, I would agree and disagree with that at the same time. So let me tell you where I disagree first. See, you know, even this mobile that we were talking earlier, this packs a punch. I mean, this has got capabilities which, if you, let's say, if somebody gives you a 1 day training program on like how to use your iPhone or like, any phone, you would be like, going, wow, 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 wow. Okay. But in real life, we don't even use maybe 10 or 15% of it. We just use it for WhatsApp 90% of the time. We use like a bit of camera. And so if you just look at like, these, they give you the screen time report. If you look at what are your top applications where you're spending 95% of the time, maybe three or four applications, and underlying maybe a few more capabilities, right? So, so one part of it is with the consumer itself, that how much are we curious about what we have, or are we, simply getting into, uh, using it for, whatever we have been using it for. So, I mean, no, I have a little bit of curiosity where I keep trying out, hey, how can I do this? How can I do this? And sometimes it's just an assumption that, you know, they should have thought of it. Apple should have thought of it, or like, Microsoft should have thought of it. And then you go down a little bit and you find that, yes, they have thought of it actually. You can do this, you can do this. And that is how you keep improving your own, I would say, utilization of what you have in your hands. So to that extent, I disagree. I think a lot is upon us as human beings, businesses, managers, in terms of how much we use the things that are given to us. Of course, there are, you can say compliances. There are various mechanisms, redressal mechanisms, that if somebody makes false promises, you can hold them accountable. So they're not really making false promises, but it's just that we are not utilizing them properly. Okay. In fact, my when so let me give a personal touch to it. When I took over as the CIO, that was 2009. The financial crisis had just happened, and there were no budgets. And my boss told me to cut budgets, and I was like, my first cut impression when I came in was, oh, we are grossly underinvested. Now, what do I do? I don't have budgets, and my boss asked me to cut budget. So I had a barter deal with my boss, and I said, "Boss, don't cut my budgets. Okay, whatever budgets you want to cut from me, I will give you that much demonstrable additional value from technologies, from IT." And he said, "How?" I said, "Listen, whatever technologies we have invested in, we are not even using 20% of that. So I'm going to be focusing on delivering value from the 80% that we are not using. It's like modules we have built, we have not used because the underlying processes have not changed, because, nobody has put a sort of, stick out there saying that, no, you can't go back to the old ways, you have to use the new way. Or, some small little things. And we actually did that. So, so to an extent, they have, uh, but we don't use, right? Now, second thing is, well, just on that point, one more thing is that, it is so much, um, these things have become so commoditized, two phones look the same. So how does someone get your mind share? It's only by, you know, um, only by bringing in some, buzzwords and crazy differentiators, and that is to grab your eyeball. They know very well that you're not going to use it. Okay. It doesn't have much of, incremental value. But everyone is competing. Everybody is like out there, you know, trying to sell, and there are lots of people and employees, and to feed, etc., etc., money to be made. So you can't really fault them, right? So I would say, yes, there are bad actors out there who are, misguiding the innocent customer. Uh, 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 Many a times, it is also a factor of, promising something, building something as a promise, and then, not sustaining it or not operationalizing it. A lot of what you see, Dr. Saab, is, where we build something, a new initiative, new idea, and then, it just goes to the dogs, because you don't put the necessary people, or, the processes to run it on a day-to-day basis. So I'll give you a simple example. uh, During COVID, there was a company which promised you, a sort of home pickup, the scheduling of appointments, a sort of virtual process, a virtual service process, where you can get in touch with the workshop and all of that. Okay. And when I came to know of it, I went there and I tried it myself, and I found that the whole thing doesn't work. The website doesn't work. The phone numbers don't work, because somebody did it, for bringing out your face that, hey, we are doing this in COVID. But when it came to putting, let's say, some monitoring technology on top of your website, whether the website works or not, when it came to putting some people to man a 24 by 7 helpline, you didn't put those resources, and therefore your promises remained promises. um, so Dr. Sab, in corporates there are lots of um, open loops out there, and they are not intentional. I would say they're not there to fleece the customer. It's just that just that how corporates work. Now that is where I think those people who do a thorough end-to-end execution, monitoring, and all of that, they are the ones who are the real differentiated guys, and not people who are just running a train chugging along, right? So, but thanks, Doxa, for that question, and I hope even though I didn't answer it to your liking, but I hope you understand my point of view, right? Okay, so we are 5 minutes away, and one of the things that is happening as we do these Ask Me Anything sessions is like we are able to just be on time. I know my guest chats have you know have been there for like 90 minutes. We have just engaged in a very enthralling conversation without losing any one of you. But I don't want to do that when I'm alone with you. Um, I don't have that much of, I would say, agenda to cover, where I won't get the guest again. So let's stop here. We still have some backlog. Let's keep some backlog for the forthcoming, AMAs. But for next week, we do have a guest, and join us again. So before I leave, thank you everyone for your for being here, and then for engaging and for asking all those questions. And for those of you who are watching the recording, please accept my gratitudes. And all of you, please enjoy your family time, and we'll be back next Saturday. Bye bye.